Welcome to In Pursuit of Truth. This is your host, Sir Patrick Mack. We are back, and I got a few things I want to talk at you about today. Now, you might be saying, Perseus Maximus, you sound a little different. What's up? Where's that raspy, yet smooth, that charming, yet slightly nasally, timbred voice that I'm used to having tickle my eardrums? Well, I snapped the seating on my original studio microphone while setting up my move to the Pursuity Palace, so I am using the travel backup, which does not sound as good. Unless, of course, you're using it for its purpose, which is spending a couple of weeks in Bali. Then it sounds super sweet. Pro tip, if you're going to do a podcast or a YouTube channel or something like that, get an XLR cable and get yourself a proper microphone. Just saying. Anyway, we're going to make it work today. Probably going to have to make it work for a while. So now that we're making it work, let's get to work. First things first, let's start off with the big stuff. Russian government resigns after President Putin's State of the Nation address proposes changes to the Constitution. Russian Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev has announced that the entire government is resigning in a surprise statement released shortly after President Vladimir Putin delivered his annual State of the Nation address. Accepting the resignation, Putin thanked the ministers for their hard work and asked them to function as a caretaker government until a new one can be formed. Medvedev and Putin have met for a work meeting to discuss the State of the Nation address earlier on Wednesday, the Kremlin said. Medvedev explained that the cabinet is resigning in accordance with Article 117, I don't know how to say that in Russian, of the Russian Constitution, which states that the government can offer its resignation to the president, who can either accept it or reject it. During his speech, Putin said he intended to create the position of Deputy Secretary of Russia's Security Council, which would be offered to Medvedev. Medvedev's move to the new role will mean Russia will have a new prime minister when a new government is formed. Putin also proposed multiple amendments to Russia's constitution. His proposals would entail substantial changes to the constitution, as well as to the entire balance of power, the power of the executive, the power of the legislature, the power of the judiciary. Wow, that sounds super familiar, Medvedev explained. In this context, it is obvious that as the government, we must provide the president with a capability to make all decisions, which are required to implement the proposed plan, Medvedev said, announcing the en masse resignation. Medvedev became prime minister in 2012 after serving 4 years as president. He currently heads the ruling United Russia Party. Now, let me take you to the bottom here. The resignation was obviously a joint decision by Putin and the outgoing PM, but was likely made at the behest of the Russian president. Political analyst Dmitry Babich told RT. The move is bound to strike a chord with a majority of Russians, he said, describing it as a very popular, albeit somewhat belated decision. Voters who overwhelmingly propelled Putin into the nation's highest office for the fourth time last year have given the president a mandate to alter Russia's political course, making it more patriotic, and the liberal-leaning government of Dmitry Medvedev simply did not fit. Medvedev is a clear-cut liberal whose cabinet was hell-bent on integrating Russia into global economic structures such as the World Trade Organization, even though many of these bodies have become increasingly hostile to Russia in recent years. Okay, so I got to tell you, I'm a bit perplexed at the moment. I'm not really sure what to think. On its face, this looks like an interesting move, maybe a very hopeful move. It definitely was a populist move. Putin's been pretty popular out there in Russia, but this was something that the people have really wanted. They wanted structural change, and it looks like they're going to get it. And they sure didn't get much of a fight from the Russian government. They all resigned, so it looks like they were all pretty prepared for this. So, not sure what to think. Breaking this up into three branches of government would seem to kind of disperse power a little bit, and that on its face could be very encouraging. Sounds very similar to the American system of government. But I do want to point out that this guy Medvedev is a globalist shill, and this guy is going to be Deputy Secretary of Security, which suggests to me that he's still going to be wielding a bunch of power. So I guess in the end of the day, it really depends on who gets put into these new positions. On its face, it may look like some big structural change. It may very well be, and it may very well not be. It's too early to tell, but it is interesting, and it's also very interesting how little attention conservative news was giving this. Now, that may change by the time of this video being published, but at the time of me making this right now, I haven't seen a whole lot, just a little bit of blips here and there. But there you go, pretty big change. Pretty big move, and it would seem to suggest that we are going to see more coming out of Russia, I would suggest, in the next 2 weeks. So all in all, an intriguing move to say the least. Definitely a big move, and we will keep on top of it. But I do want to point out that Russia has long been under pressure from the quote-unquote global community, and this quote-unquote global community is often made up of globalists. So could this just be a populist movement on its face to appease the people and say, hey, look at all this restructure, when in fact they're just putting lipstick on a pig? I don't really know. Maybe it really truly is an assertive move to restructure their government, and we'll have to see how it works out. But like I said, I think the real key will be seeing who ends up filling those new seats in this new government. But we will keep on top of that. Now, for our next story, I want to rememberize you of a story we've actually put a couple of videos into, and that is this explosion at a home in Detroit. Well, we've got a few updates. You may vaguely remember this story.
And now it's time for vague memories.
I remember that. Detroit house exploded when woman lit cigarette hour after bullet pierced gas pipe in the basement, police say. A Detroit house explosion that injured 6 people earlier this month happened because a woman lit a cigarette about an hour after someone fired a gun, piercing the gas pipe in the basement with a bullet and allowing gas to leak inside the home, fire officials said. The house exploded the night of January 4th in the 14400 block of Evergreen Road on Detroit's west side, according to authorities. Now, I want to stop right here because we've talked about this story quite a few times. If you have not seen my videos entitled Detroit Evergreen and Detroit Evergreen 2, we've talked about this house explosion a couple of different times. And at first, they just mentioned that the house exploded. They didn't mention anything about the gun. They didn't mention anything about the cigarette. And of course, at the time, all 6 victims were in the hospital. So maybe that's why more stuff was coming out. But this is very, very strange. So someone fired off a bullet in the basement, and that allowed a gas leak. And somebody was smart enough to light a cigarette an hour afterwards. Well, you would think that if gas was leaking for about an hour, you would smell it by then. 6 people ranging from 20 to 38 years old were rushed to a nearby hospital, officials said. All 6 victims had 2nd or 3rd degree burns on their bodies, police said. 2 were treated for smoke inhalation. We're talking about an explosion that you would hear on YouTube. Or something like that on YouTube. All right. Man, I thought we were going to World War III. 2 doors from the home were blown into the middle of the street. Shattered glass and debris littered the yard. Okay, so this is a really, really crazy story, and we're getting more and more developments every single day. So they originally reported this explosion on its own, and then a separate article updated to let us know that a dog had been rescued from the rubble of this explosion. They temporarily named that dog Miracle. Now, please go watch my Evergreen videos 1 and 2, Detroit Evergreen 1 and 2, if you want to get caught up on this story, because we're not going to go deep into Detroit today. But I find this very curious because this now seems to be the 4th update to that very same story, and each time it gets more and more curious. So we had the one dog named Miracle who was rescued, and now we've got 2 more dogs. Hours after a Saturday house explosion, a Detroit firefighter contacted Fox 2 to say that a dog had been found buried alive. That dog was rescued, but then we heard from him again saying there were 2 more dogs outside in the cold. 2 dogs, Cane Corsos, were still chained up behind a house on Thursday until it exploded Saturday night. The blast on Evergreen on Detroit's west side sent 5 people into the hospital with serious burns, and there appears to be the dogs right there. Hours later, investigators found the dog buried in the rubble. DTE Energy, the Detroit Fire Department, ATF, Detroit Police Department all worked to free the dog, who had a broken pelvis. The Detroit pit crew rushed her to a veterinarian. She's now recovering and doing well. The Detroit pit crew also notified Detroit Animal Care and Control via email that 2 more dogs were on the property and needed to be rescued. We have no legal authority or anything like that, said Teresa Sumter, Detroit pit crew. So we took the injured dog, we rushed her to an emergency vet, then we immediately emailed Detroit Animal Care and Control and said there was another dog on the property. We saw 2 more dogs. Okay, so fair enough. This is I found very strange. A couple lines down. Fox 2 contacted Detroit Dog Rescue. They came out Wednesday night, but it was too dark, too dangerous, and the dogs were too scared. They were given some straw. Thanks for the straw! to get through the cold night. And fortunately, DTE workers had been coming by and feeding the dogs, becoming more concerned by the day, wondering when someone was coming to get the dogs. Okay, so it looks like they finally got them. It said they were a bit skinny, like they were underfed, and there's a picture of the dogs right there. They do look a little bit skinny. But so we now have an explosion, which is the second explosion in a year's time, about a year's time, almost exactly a year's time, actually. We reported on some nearby strange goo on Evergreen. We've reported sinkholes on Evergreen. And of course, we've gone into big detail. But now this explosion reveals not one, but 3 dogs that have been found. And somebody fired off a gun in the basement and then lit a cigarette and blew the whole dang thing up. Creepy. So as I pointed out in those 2 videos and numerous other videos, we've had a number of strange house explosions. And what's strange about these explosions is that even though they could be blamed on gas, and maybe some of them are indeed faulty gas lines, there's always something extra to the story. We're just finding out about this gun. That seems like a pretty interesting twist. And why is it that you were able to dig these dogs out of the rubble, but you weren't able to notice that there were 2 other dogs? Now, it could be like they just said it was too dark and dangerous or whatever, but something seems very strange. And again, we have references to dogs. If you've been following my channel for a while, you've noticed that over the last couple of years, we've seen an incessant number of stories involving references to dogs. We're not exactly sure what the communications mean, but we do know that there seems to be a lot of references, a lot of odd numerical value references, and of course, references to Evergreen. And a number of these explosions involved either dogs or references to evergreens. Here was another one that I forgot to mention the other day. This was from 2017. This was a trailer park and it exploded in Evergreen Springs in Clinton, Connecticut. Now, maybe some of these are not connected, but it seems like we have a number of them that tend to have the same theme. And I also want to rememberize you of this from 2018. This was from World Maritime News, where the Evergreen terminal was evacuated after one of their containers exploded. And for those of you who are not familiar with Evergreen shipping lines, this is we've done a number of videos on this and their possible links to human trafficking. And we do know that a lot of human trafficking is involved in the shipping container industry, much because they're largely go unchecked. You know, it's really hard to scan a container ship. But in this particular one, this was loaded with scrap metal. And of course, they announced that this thing caught fire. But in the story, it says they were investigating 10 additional shipping containers believed to be carrying the same material. So were they just trying to light something on fire, or was there something else? This was going down at the Los Angeles port. But again, another explosion, another Evergreen. Now, you may remember me talking about in those videos this green slime on Evergreen. And here now we have this story from the AP on the 11th. Super fun cleanup considered for Detroit green goo site. An industrial site in suburban Detroit from which a greenish stream of contaminated water leaked onto a freeway will be considered for the federal Superfund cleanup program, Michigan officials said Friday. The State Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy said an evaluation of the Electroplating Services Incorporated site will be completed this spring. It will be based on dozens of soil and water samples being taken by the department and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Okay, so we talked about this green slime, right? It seems to be involving this hexavalent chromium. And this stuff we have been able to trace. It looks like they were using it on some sort of plating for this missile base nearby, this Nike missile base nearby. And of course, this has been shut down, but it's still been seeping underground for a very long time. Go back into my old videos, the ones I just suggested, if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about. But this is very dangerous stuff. It says it's associated with cancer, kidney, and liver damage. But here's the real kicker here. The Superfund program enables EPA to arrange cleanup of highly contaminated sites by requiring polluters to pay for the work or using government funds when responsible parties can't be found. Okay, well, that doesn't sound like cleanup at all, does it? It just sounds like the polluters just have to pay for the work or use government funds when responsible parties can't be found. Okay, well, they could just say, well, I'm not responsible. He's not responsible. We don't know who's responsible. So we're just going to use this. Super fun. Sounds very, very strange. Michigan officials said Friday they had also detected high levels of per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. That's more than one fluoroalkyl substance, known as PFAS, in water collected by a sump pump in the facility's basement. Okay, so interesting timing that this comes out right around the same time as my videos, but it's nice to see that they're at least attempting to do something. But I gotta tell you, this doesn't look like much cleaning up. This just sounds like another reason to pump money into a super fund. And speaking of strange stories involving dogs, I have a strange story involving dogs. This is from the 14th, from the Daily Mail UK. Off-duty Secret Service agent kills dog in front of owners in Brooklyn. The U.S. Secret Service has revised its account of an incident where one of its off-duty agents shot and killed a dog in Brooklyn on Monday, saying that the pet was leashed but unsecured and aggressive. The agent was walking home near the corner of 8th Street and Caton Place in the Windsor Terrace neighborhood at around 10 p.m. on Monday when he encountered a couple with their female Belgian Shepherd. I just want to stop right there. Wasn't a female Belgian Shepherd also involved in the killing of Abu Bakr al-Hujr Baghdadi? Police said the agent, who has not been named, told the dog charged at him, prompting him to pull out his gun and shoot her. The agent claimed a couple's Belgian Shepherd was off its leash and charged at him at the corner of 8th Street and Caton Place. The Secret Service initially described the dog as unleashed, but in a statement released to thedailymail.com on Tuesday, the agency said this animal was unrestrained and aggressive at the time of the shooting. Okay, well, that seems very curious, right? Unrestrained and aggressive. Enough for you to want to shoot it, eh? As this is an ongoing investigation, the Secret Service will not have further comments, the statement read. Now, this is where it gets weird. A source familiar with the investigation confirmed to DailyMail.com that the dog did have a leash, but was unsecured from her owner, who was not there at the time of the incident. Okay, so maybe they were holding the leash is what they're saying, and the dog was able to run free. Witness accounts, however, describe seeing the dog accompanied by a man and a woman. The New York Daily News reported, citing unnamed police sources, that the federal agent became startled when the dog started barking at him as he rounded the corner and came face to face with the couple walking their pet. And I just want to stop there real quick too. Normally, when a dog is barking, they are not really that interested in biting, and I don't want to get way into all that, but usually if a dog's going to bite you or really attack you, its ears are pinned back and it's going straight for you. The bark is usually to prevent them having to bite you. So this already sounds strange. Police spent 2 hours working at the scene of the incident before the body of the dog was allowed to be removed. The U.S. Secret Service claimed in a statement the dog was unleashed. Okay, they already said that, but this is really, really curious here. The armed off-duty agent who is said to have fired a single shot at the dog, causing her to collapse dead. A witness, Walter Blankenship, recounted hearing the male dog owner yelling at the Secret Service agent, "I can't effing believe you let the gun go off." Okay, well, that sounds like a strange thing to say. You let the gun go off? You could say, "I can't believe you shot it. I can't believe you shot my dog. You just effing shot my dog." You understand what I'm saying, right? But to let the gun go off? Sounds curious. Here's another very strange story from the Wichita Eagle in Kansas. Kansas lawmakers whisked away for secret Homeland Security briefing. Call it routine. The Department of Homeland Security held an unusual closed-door briefing to Kansas lawmakers on Tuesday that briefly cast a sense of 9/11-era uncertainty over the State House. One lawmaker said the briefing centered on contacts by individuals trying to gain access to technological and agricultural information. Military personnel in unmarked white buses arrived shortly after noon to whisk House Democrats and later Republicans to Forbes Field in Topeka, an installation maintained by the Kansas National Guard. Senators will receive their briefing later this month. It turns out that the session has been in the works since at least December, according to a letter from the Kansas Attorney General Derek Schmidt's office to legislative leaders. Still, senior lawmakers couldn't recall an event quite like it. Even during 9/11, we didn't do anything like this. House Democratic leader Tom Sawyer, a Wichita Democrat, who has been in office for three decades, said, totally not routine. But after returning from Forbes more than 2 hours later, Sawyer painted a more benign picture. It was just a routine kind of security briefing, kind of an update on how they're trying to keep Kansas safe. Okay, so then everybody comes back from this meeting at Forbes Field, says it's just a routine thing, and yet they've never recalled anything like it. And already 9/11 uncertainty, and they show up here in these unmarked white buses, which seems like a real mess. And of course, I have no idea why they're briefing Democrats and Republicans separate. This seems very far from routine. And of course, everyone seemed to agree until they came back. And now they're just saying that they toured this facility, which I would imagine is a very secure site. If it's at Forbes Field, I would assume that it's an incredibly secure site. But this has to do with technology and agriculture, which leads me to wonder if we are talking about China and some of all of this corn stuff. And if you're not familiar with that, I highly suggest you check out my video entitled Cracked Corn. We talked about this quite a bit too, but this had a lot to do with mysterious tweets going back and forth between Devin Nunes, Chuck Grassley, James Comey. They were talking about corn. Does this have something to do with the Chinese and the stealing? And basically what they were doing is they were stealing seeds, bringing them back to China. And, of course, this corn seed business, not just corn, but agricultural seeds are a very, very big business. Is that what we're talking about here? Not really sure, but either way, it was a big deal. And it was a big enough deal for them to take him to Forbes Field for a tour. But let me take you down a little further here. House Speaker Ron Rickman, an Oath Republican, said the briefing involved information that Governor Laura Kelly and Attorney General Derek Schmidt wanted lawmakers to know for being safe. Asked if lawmakers were warned against general foreign threats and attempts to access information, Rickman nodded yes. Okay, so it is about all that. And finally, as you can see right here, being reported by ABC quote-unquote news, House Speaker Nancy Pants Pelosi signs the Articles of Impeachment, otherwise known as the Imparticles, against President Trump before they were delivered to the Senate. And everyone's looking super cheery. They even got a free pen. Look at all those sweet free pens. She's like, I'm going to use one for every single letter. There's A, and there's B, and now she's having a lot of fun with that. Well, let's take a look at the delivery.
Impeachment.
Maybe they just got lost. They don't look happy to be delivering those. I wonder why. Looks like game on in D.C. One more final thing for you. Embattled porn lawyer Michael Avenatti has been arrested once again. He was seen leaving with federal agents. The funny thing is that he was already in a hearing. They were on a break from his own disciplinary hearing for his whole extortion thing with Nike. For those of you who don't remember, he basically approached Nike saying, hey, I know you are paying college players, so I'll tell you what, why don't you pay me a bunch of money and I'll get to the bottom of it. Yeah. So anyway, in the middle of that hearing, while they took a break, federal agents whisked him away in violation of what seems to be his release agreement. So we shall see, but I have a feeling he's going to be doing some jail time. That's all I got for you for now. I'm going to go try and fix some of these sound issues. As always, if you like this video, please click like, share, and subscribe. Thanks to all of you who do that already. My alternate links are down below to my Gab, my BitChute. I'm over here at DropSpace at IPOT 1776, same as Twitter, IPOT 1776. And I'm also on, what else am I on? I'm Gab. They're all down below. My P.O. box is down below. My email is down below if you got info for me. And my Patreon is down below if you'd like to support the channel. It's all down below. All right, kids, until next time, stay funky.